in about a minute or so. I'm going to ask you to stop right there. The rest you obviously can do for your own homework. What we're interested in is, first of all, I want to find out, and Elizabeth will do some follow-up questions, but I'm really curious as to when the questions were asked, what came up for you? I don't want to know what's on your paper right now. Elizabeth will kind of process that with you, but I'm really interested in what came up for you as you were having to respond to the questions. What was your emotional state? What was your mental state? What was going on?
I don't want to be a part of a prejudice. I don't believe in that.
Okay, so you don't want to be a part of a prejudiced group? Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't want to, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Other folks, thoughts, feelings as you were thinking about those questions?
I was questioning what is race and what is ethnicity. And when she said, well, for example, I'm white, I'm like, well, that's your ethnicity. That's not your race. You're part of the human race.
Okay.
So that kind of got me, do you know what I'm saying? I was puzzled by the whole direction with it.
Okay. So that's what you thought about. But as you went the next level down, what as you thought about that stuff, what came up? Outside of just thinking about that first level, what was the next level?
The next level was that you told us this was going to be a presentation on what were your terms?
White guilt.
White guilt.
Yes.
And I thought, well, okay, so this is about ethnicity, and so I should change the way I'm looking at this.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Anyone else have a different way of, or how did you think about the questions as they were being asked on the paper?
I put history and then historical, and I didn't realize I had the same thing in 2 different blocks.
Okay.
I have Native American background.
Okay.
And also Northern European white. So, in a sense, I'm really saddened by what's happened to my people. But on the other hand, my people are Scandinavians who married Native Americans and are somehow finding harmony. So I'm really proud of that.
All right. Good. Elizabeth, do you want to take us through the questions? We have about 3 minutes to go through these questions before we move to the next step.
Now, what do you want me to do now?
So let's just get the responses
Sure.
to those.
So how did you each answer the question, what is your race?
White Caucasian. Okay.
White Native American.
White Native American.
Human.
Human. Okay.
Oh, good for you.
That was where I first went. So.
Yeah. And then what do
I'm
you
sad
like?
that I didn't.
What do you like about your race? About being your race?
I don't necessarily like it, but I mean, I feel like, I think it's changing because I feel like I've always been a part of a larger majority and not the minority. And I don't know what it's like to be a minority. Just was touchy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you were uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I want you to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Right?
Rich in oral tradition.
Rich in oral tradition. How about you?
I said, unsure, it's just what I am.
I'm sure it's just what you are. Okay.
And then describe a time you were proud of being your race.
I had a hard time with that one. I put not sure. I don't feel like I've ever been proud of being white. I can't define that.
Okay.
Guidelines around a powwow.
Okay.
Northeast, southwest.
Yeah.
Going to the moon.
Going to the moon.
Oh, yeah, see?
Okay.
Getting stuff done. Describe a time when you were embarrassed.
This is really hard. Because it's not so much what I said or did, it's what my ex-husband did that made me feel like I was not a part of who he was and his values and morals. My daughter wanted to date a black man when she was 16, and she dated one of the barbers down from Wayzata.
Yeah.
And it was like, he wasn't, I can't be prejudiced and say, oh, it's not like a black person or a white person, because he's perfectly, accepted socially as black and white at Wayzata. My ex-husband said to me, if you allow our daughter to date this man, I will divorce you over it.
Mm-hmm.
I was embarrassed for me and myself and who I was with, and I'm like, are you kidding me? If she can't see the color beyond, you can't see beyond the color of somebody's skin, who the hell are you? And I divorced him.
Oh, wow.
Wow, I don't
Not
have
right then, but it was a part of the
Right.
recognition of the morals and values and principles of who he was and I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other folks.
War.
War. Okay. So embarrassed of the war nature that we kind of get caught in.
Yeah.
So if you could rate, no, I'll just ask the question straight out. So here we are, we've got these 4 questions, and if you had a client that you asked them, you said, you know what, tell me something good about you. You ask the client that, right? So you have a teenager in your office, they're sitting there, and you're like, tell me something good about you. And they can't come up with anything. What would you say about that youth of that client?
Self-esteem.
That they have low self-esteem, all right? So if you ask them to tell you all the bad things about themselves, and they're able to just list that stuff off, what would you say about that young person that's sitting in your office? What would you say about them?
They have an imbalance
That they have an imbalance of what?
of their understanding of self.
Of their understanding of self. And what would be the recommendation that you might give to this young person?
Homework,
What kind of homework?
to ask people that they know to make a list. Come back with 10 things, with 10 different people or 5 different people. So come back with a list.
Opinions of others of what they think of. Yeah.
Is that wrong?
No. It's absolutely right. That's exactly what I would do. I would have them look out and have people give them stuff. And we call it in business, we call it 360 feedback, right? So you go 360 degrees around you, all parts of, your home, your work, your blah, 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 and they give you feedback on your behavior and your successes and all that kind of stuff. The basic premise of this conversation is that white people are missing that 360 feedback. That as we go forward in this age of diversity and multiculturalism and that kind of stuff, white people are not taking the time or been provided the space to say, I've contributed some good things in this country. I've also contributed some bad things to this country, but that's who I am. And so part of what ends up happening is that white people in general get low self-esteem about being white. As a high school teacher, one of the things that I would ask my students, we go through, and whether you use the term race or ethnicity, that really doesn't matter to me as much as the sentiment that's attached to those words. But I would go around the classroom and I ask my students these very same questions. Tell me about your race. And my Hispanic kids could pop stuff off. My black kids had tons of stuff to say. My Native American kids, my Hmong kids would be able to talk about their culture. And my white kids would say, I'm American. Well, we're all American, right? So how is that any different? And so one of the problems that I typically saw, and I see even in the workplaces today, is that people will be upset with so-called minority groups because they've created these ways that they can make sense of the world. And so people will say, well, why is there BET, Black Entertainment Television, right? And I typically hear that from white people. I don't hear that from people of color very much, but I hear that from white people. And white people are upset about that because they say, we don't have white TV. But the truth of the matter is, it's called NBC, CBS, HBO, all this other stuff. But people don't align themselves with what it means to be their ethnic group, because what it's mean to be American has meant to forget where you came from to become this thing called American. And so a lot of times, Germans and Swedes, they will remember that stuff, but they've given up so much of that stuff to become this artificial thing called white. And so my final thought and my final closing with you is that what I need for white people is to do the homework that you kind of assign, right? Find out more about your culture. Find out more about who you are so that when you see me, you're not jealous of me living my own life and being successful in my own right.
Yeah, and then I have a response to that. Having not knowing where Andre was going with this today, I will say that one of the key moments or parts of my life that allowed me to feel better about being white was going back and doing that cultural work, finding out more about what it meant to be Scandinavian, what it meant to be Irish, what were some of the traditional cultural patterns of those groups, so that I do have some healthy places out of which to operate as opposed to what is it mean to be white. Such a good point.
And when we get to that place, we're able to do our homework around that, right? We understand. Because people often ask me, they say, well, why are the Somalis coming to wherever I am, and why are the Asians, and why are the blah, 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 blah. It becomes really simple when we've done our own homework, because we understand that our behavior through this process is helping us to get significance, belonging, and safety. And so when we have people who are coming from other cultures, other countries, what are they coming for? They're coming for significance, belonging, and safety. Now, the problem is with us is that we've got a clash between how we do things and how their methods have been different because of where they come from. But if I can understand that people are doing this because they're looking for significance, belonging, and safety, and I understand what my pattern has been, I don't have to feel guilty.
Right.
And one of the things that often happens to white people is that they get paralyzed by this concept of being called a racist. Right? I know particularly my students would try to use that as a tool to manipulate my behavior. They would say, you're being racist, or you're being blah, 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 to take the attention off of their behavior and then put the attention on mine. And so you don't have to feel guilty, A, about stuff you didn't do, but B, you do have to take responsibility for where we currently are. We all drive cars. Those cars have blind spots. We did not create those blind spots, but we have to be aware of those blind spots. And the only way that we can be aware of the blind spots is by looking for them. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andre.
What a good metaphor.
Wow,
That's a great
that
metaphor.
40 minutes.
Had to get all of that done.
You did, you did.
I'm going to borrow that if that's okay.
Oh,
The blind
fine.
It's
spot
weird, that's
metaphor.
just,
Yeah.
it's like, I almost felt that, like I was embarrassed to be a part of a society that didn't really have that, just had the label of being white.
Right.
There's no,
You have a cultural
Yeah.
identity was my point.
But you
I loved
have
your
some,
point.
because we were actually talking about that in the line at Subway.
yeah,
Because you said, well, what's your heritage?
yep.
And I said, I'm a Heinz 57,
Yeah.
and nobody has a clue.
I'm
But that's
Danish.
great.
And she said, well, I'm Danish and I'm this, so
Yeah.
see, it did,
But
it's funny
even-
how we
I
came back
know.
to this.
But even in the Heinz 57, you get to make some declarations
About
about
who
what
you
that
are.
means.
Right.
As
Yeah.
opposed to,
Yeah,
that
like,
they're...
'cause that confused me, I'm like, well, tell me more, like,
Yeah.
something's gotta stand out to you. That-
How are you guys?
Good.
Good. That apple looks delicious. Is it? Oh,
My
cool.
grandpa came from Denmark,
Good,
and I never
good.
got to go over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.